Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video, and today we're taking a look at a pretty spectacular blade. This is the Koenig Arius. Now, this knife is not mine. It comes to us for review from my viewer Bennett. And by the way, if you want to give him a follow on Instagram, it's at BigIronBen. Thank you so much for doing that. This has been a great knife to get to sort of learn about and check out and familiarize myself with for review. Absolutely impressive. So total joy. Thanks a lot, Ben, for doing that. And I'm sure the viewers appreciate it as well because they get to check out a really sweet knife. A little bit of background on this guy. You may recall that this was initially, this design, the Arius was initially built by Millet Knives probably 3-4 years ago. It's one of the first knives that I remember like knowing that they were the OEM on it. Since that time, though, Bill Koenig has set up his own manufacturing, is doing this on his own, and he's doing a fantastic job. It's really well done. The designer on this is TJ Schwartz, and he's also doing a great job. He's got a CRKT coming out this year, and he's got some nice knives out there, so check him out. In fact, Blade HQ did sort of a profile on him 2 or 3 weeks ago, which is a really fun video. Go check that out. I think you'll appreciate it. If I remember, I'll put it down in the description box. If I forget, just remind me in the comments. The other thing to say is this knife does have a couple of upgrades, and I'm going to review it as it stands, and you can go on the website to check out all the variations that are available. As of the making of this video, there are some available. So you should, if you just love this and you must have one, you should be able to click over there and pick one up. Koenig Knives website. So let's start off with the size and weight. This guy is 8 9/16 overall. Blade length is 3.5 inches. Handle length is 5 1/16. And because of the carbon fiber handle, this guy only weighs 4.6 ounces, which is pretty lightweight. And I can tell you guys, I have carried this a bit and it carries really well. Not only is the weight nice, but with the contoured edges, it goes in and out of pocket really well. So in terms of size, weight, and carry, for a knife of this size, it carries really comfortably. Total win as far as that goes. Now, obviously, this is not for a lefty, and I didn't bother to check. I'm not a lefty, so I don't think of it, but I should have checked to see if they're available in a left-handed version. I'm not sure about that. So let's talk about the blade first. This blade is one of the things that I really like about this knife. It's a fairly wide blade, and it is a very high hollow grind. Very high, which means you've got this super thin edge down here, and this thing slices like crazy. Okay, and that is wonderful, guys. If you're like me and you like a knife that cuts stuff, then you're gonna love this knife. The blade is really well done, and I kind of wish other knife makers would kind of take a look at this profile and how they've done this, the distance here and the angle they've used, and just copy it because it is fantastic. Really works well. Great sharpening tool here. The plunge grind works really well. Nice drop point with a bit of a swedge on here. And then of course you've got this hole that does work as an opening hole. All right. And the opening hole kind of ties into this sort of fuller type deal. In terms of actual use, this blade cuts really nicely. It's CTSX HP steel on this one, but there are a couple of different steels available. And the DLC is fine. I like the look of it. Okay, this knife is very attractive. For me, I would prefer, they have a satin finish that I think I would have been leaning toward a little more, but you guys know that's kind of one of my preferences. So in terms of the blade on this, yes, okay, total win. It cuts wonderfully. The design is great. The opening hole is accessible. It's just, they've done the blade really well. And I think you'll start to see, there are a few little touches on here, details that are well done. And that's what separates a knife like this, seeing those kinds of little things that are just nearly perfectly executed. Blade is a total win. I absolutely love this blade design. I'm not sure how I feel about the look of it. Okay, if you kind of cover up the knife and just look at the blade, I'm not totally in love with the way this hole is aesthetically, but one, I think it fits the knife really well. You sort of have this sort of, sorry about that, have this sort of hourglass shape where it's thick here and thin here and thick down here. So it does tie together well. And of course, in a satin finish, I really like these. I've looked at, of course, a number of them in preparation for this. Let's move on now to lockup and deployment, or the action as we like to say. So this has a flipper on it. It's ball bearing, ceramic ball bearing pivot, which is smooth as silk. It works really nice if spider flicked, and you can even open this with the thumb if you want to. It works great like that. So I have no problem, you know, just a really, really nice knife to work. Opens well in just about every way. The detent is dialed in pretty much right where you'd want it, guys. You know, any stiffer than this, then you'd probably have a hard time opening it with your thumb. All right, and I can even, if I'm, you know, if I forget for a moment and get my fingers on the lock bar a little bit, I can still flip the knife out. So really nicely done there. They have milled this out at the back, and this is one of the knives where I really noticed this. It's very comfortable to flip because your finger really does kind of fall into this nice little divot here, and it works really well. The lock bar, of course, you have a stainless steel lock bar insert. That's pretty much assumed on a knife of this at this level. But the other thing is the lock bar tension is dialed right in. It's so comfortable. The jimping is just perfect. It catches your finger without feeling rough at all. So very, very impressive action on this knife. You can see it's absolute drop shut. The only complaint I have about the action on here, which is a real nitpick, and it really is, guys, is the way the detent ball slides over that DLC. It makes a really noticeable whoosh, 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 whoosh when you open. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not, but I can really hear it, and it just kind of bothers me a little bit. So that's about my only nitpicking, guys. That's really grasping at straws to be complaining about the sound of the detent ball on the blade. And that probably wouldn't be there on a satin or stonewashed blade. So really, really dialed in, guys. The action on this is absolutely spectacular. Now, what about the handle on this guy? Well, this happens to be the carbon fiber titanium, and it also happens to be the one that has that milling pattern. Let's see if you can see it on the carbon fiber. I don't know if you'll be able to or not. There you go. See the lines there that you can just, when it catches the light right? And so this is really, really grippy. And what I love about this milling pattern is it doesn't detract anything from the knife. The overall feel of the knife, the look of the knife is still very clean. It's still, you know, in fact, you can hardly tell that it's not just the plain titanium until you get it in your hand and you're like, wow, this is really, really good. So that milling pattern, if you're gonna buy one of these, I would suggest that it's worth it. I honestly can't remember what the upcharge is, but there is an upcharge for it. But wow, it feels good in hand. The other thing, of course, this has the carbon fiber scale, which I love. And over, guys, again, you've heard me talk about how I love when they are kind of brave enough to do just the carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is a really, really strong material. That's the whole deal with carbon fiber. So why you would feel like you need a steel liner in here is beyond me. And of course, they don't have one. And so I do like that. Look at this backspacer, really beautifully blue anodized backspacer. By the way, I've recently seen on Koenig's Instagram that there's Timascus, I believe, backspacer and clip for this that you may want to go to, or if you've already got one of these, you could upgrade to. Really nicely done. Again, the jimping in a reverse grip. This is, the jimping here is really good. It does catch your palm just a little bit when you're holding the knife. And the way that they've profiled this handle, I know we're kind of moving from construction now to ergonomics, but the profile on this is really, really natural. It just, you know, when you get it in hand, it just feels like it was meant to be there. And so, yeah, the ergos here are fantastic. No sharp edges, no hot spots of any kind. Absolutely impressed with everything about the way this knife feels and functions. As you just kind of, as you're fondling this knife, it just kind of screams quality and thoughtfulness. No detail seems to have been missed. The milled clip is really well done, and it's screwed from the inside, which I love. It just really adds an element to the design as far as I'm concerned. The only minor issue I have with this clip is I did have some pants where I had a hard time getting it in the pocket. There's not a ton of space in here, so another millimeter would have been really appreciated to have under this clip. Now, it's not as bad as some knives that where I've really complained. I'd say 80% of the time that I was testing this out, and every time I'd wear a different pair of pants to work, I would check this to see how it fit in them. And in most things like jeans and stuff, it's fine. It was only really a problem in the reinforced pockets on like 511s or something like that. Oh, did I mention the lanyard hole? I think I already did, but the lanyard hole is nicely integrated here into the backspacer. Just if I'm being redundant here, just bear with me. Otherwise, I did want to point that out, that it's nicely done, and it actually seems to sort of accentuate the design rather than detract from it, which is so often the case. Yeah, very, very impressed with the construction on this. The ergonomics are absolutely perfect. And even in even as you extend ergonomics to how it feels to lock and unlock and deploy the blade and cut with, it's, really, really good. Let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. This is, of course, a high-end production knife. So I've got a few other sort of high-end production knives that I wanted to throw in here. Here is the Riot Knives, or I guess the Todbeg Steelcraft Bodega, built by Riot Knives. But these kind of remind me of one another because they're kind of a step beyond just a knife that's going to work well. They're really a little bit more dressed up, and in some ways, reach that level of high collectability, and of course, a little bit of pocket jewelry there. While we're talking about Riot knives, here is the Torrent. You guys know that whenever I'm talking about high-end knives, I'm always going to bring this out because it's such a great example of just exceptionally done detail and action and detent and everything else. And of course, there's a pretty big price difference here. Now, I'm going to talk about price difference in 1 second. Before I do, let's pull in a couple of more budget knives. Here is the Real Steel Megalodon. This is the Megalodon Eclipse, I think it's called, in the carbon fiber. And guys, you know what? This is going to be awful to say, but the action on this knife is every bit as good as this one, even though this is a very much more budget-friendly knife. The action on this is superb for its cost. Really, it's superb no matter what, but it's amazing that it's in a knife that costs that much. A very comparable knife. I find, very similar size, very similar materials, even a very similar footprint overall. This, of course, is the Zero Tolerance 0562, another great EDC folder. Now, quite a bit heavier on this guy. And the ergos, this is an extremely ergonomic knife. It really is, but this is a great example, okay? This knife feels great in hand. But then when you pick up this one, you realize that this is like superb, okay? And so the ergonomics on this knife really, really are impressive. What else have we got here? I'm gonna wait with that one. Here is a Kaiser Escort, designed by Pinkerton. I thought I'd bring this in just because it's a a more budget-friendly titanium frame lock that, some of you watching this might go, man, I just love a titanium frame lock. But, and here's where this knife really excels. The hollow grind here makes this really nice and thin behind the edge. So if you're feeling my comments on that really thin hollow grind, this shares a similar edge profile and cuts pretty well, especially considering the blade. Finally, of course, actually not finally, but almost finally, Chris Reeve Large Inkosi, a knife that everyone's familiar with. This is basically the same size as a 21 or a 25, so if you're familiar with those knives, that should give you a good idea of what you're dealing with for size as well. Very different knives, but this is such a quintessential titanium frame lock that it's worth, I think, bringing in for comparison. And then finally, let's grab the Olamic Swish. And you can see, again, similar in size. The action on these are similar. I would say that the Koenig is actually a little bit better. Not that this isn't great, it really is. I'm absolutely adore this knife. But the action of all the knives that I've shown you here, the deployment on here, the smoothness of it is pretty darn good. Now, I do want to make a quick note about cost. And as we talk about sort of my overall impressions on this knife, if you've been watching the whole time, you know I like it. Okay, it is really, really well done. It's attractive. It's great in terms of its performance. It's beautiful in terms of its design. So yeah, this knife really, really gets a lot of things right, but it's expensive. I know that, guys. there is a reason for that. You got to think, if you're, let's be honest, manufacturing anything in North America these days is a huge uphill battle. Whether you're thinking about the cost of property and the cost of the warehouse that you're going to build it, you're going to have all your machining in, the cost of labor, all of those things add up to quite a substantial price. So your choices are, oh, by the way, when you're having people work with you and work for you, if you're making something to this level of precision, you're not hiring low-level laborers. You've got to hire people who have some ability along these lines, that are more craftsmen than just, pushing a button on a machine. So because of all that, I think when you look at the prices of North American-made high-end production knives, the prices become a little more justifiable. Okay. Now, it may not be justifiable for you. You may say, I don't care, I don't care if it's made by the most, well-educated master craftsman in the world. I'm not paying that price for a knife. Fair enough. Okay. But I did want to put that out there, because I know one of the things I'll often get on expensive knives is some pushback on, why could a knife ever cost this much? Well, you got to figure, if you've got a few $1 million in, machinery, and then you've got to pay your laborers, your labor $20, $25 an hour, that's going to add up pretty quickly, and that price is going to have to be carried over into the price of the knife. You're also making a limited number. Okay, so where Spyderco can make 10,000 of something and sell them for $200 a piece, now you're making 1,000 of something, and you've got to increase the price accordingly. So all of those things need to be considered when we talk about the price of high-end production knives, especially the ones that come from North America. And that's why you can't really compare. This is a fantastic knife. It's exceptionally well made. So is this. Now, this isn't quite in the same category as these two, but my whole little diatribe there was just explaining why there's such a difference in cost between this and this. All right. Overall, yeah, I absolutely recommend this knife. I love the design. I love the look. It functions wonderfully. It's amazing in hand. And so, yeah, I think this is a great, great knife. If you have the money and you love the design, I wouldn't hesitate for a second to buy this. It is very, very well done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.